Welcome. In this video, we're going to continue working on building out our Phaser 3 implementation of our Tic Tac Toe game prototype. So previously, in our last video, we went ahead and created a basic Phaser 3 game instance. We went ahead and created some image game objects, and we added some reactivity to the game objects by allowing a player to click on them, and we log a message to our console. And we also started adding in some text game objects and some basic graphics objects to create a visual representation of what we want our game to look like. So if you missed the previous video, there'll be a link on your screen now for you to go ahead and check that out. All right, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and create our basic structure for our Tic-Tac-Toe class. So to do this, we're going to come into our source folder. Let's add a new file, and we're just going to call this tic-tac-toe.ts. And what we'll do is we're going to export out a default class, and we're just going to call this tic-tac-toe. And then we'll go ahead and add in a basic constructor, and we'll leave it empty for the time being. Then what we're going to do is we're going to add in some of the properties that we'll need for our class. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to add a private property, and we're going to call this board, and we're going to set this to an empty array. And so this board is going to be a representation of our tic-tac-toe board. So this is going to be an array of arrays. And so this is going to represent our rows and our columns for our tic-tac-toe game. And so for our rows and columns, and so our array, basically we need to keep track of which game piece, so which player has claimed that space. And so to do that, we're going to make a new type. And so what we'll do is we're just going to make a type. We're going to call this cell. And for our types, we'll have three values. So we're going to have X, we're going to have O, and then we will have if the space is empty because no one has claimed it yet. So with our cell, we're going to set our board property to our cell type, and it will be a cell array, a double array. So it will be a 2D array of our cells. So next, what we need to do is we need to add a property to keep track of whose turn it is. So we'll do a private property. We'll call this current player's turn. And we're going to go ahead and set this to a new type, a new value, an enum, and we're going to call it player. And for our player enum, we will either have X or O, depending on whose turn it is. So we need to go ahead and create this enum. So we'll do enum player, and this will have just our two values we mentioned. We'll have X, so it'll be equal to X, and we will have O, which will be equal to O. All right, and then we just need to add two more properties. So the next one we're going to add is we're going to keep track if there is a game winner in our game. So for our game winner, this will either be player X, player O, or it will be a draw if the game ends in a draw. So to keep track of that, we'll add a new type, and we're going to call this game winner. And so this will be either undefined. So when the game first starts, we will have our X value, we will have our O, and then we will have draw. And then we will do a private property. We will call this game winner, and this will be typed to game winner. And we will start off with undefined. And for our final property, we'll do winning cells. So winning cells is meant to represent the coordinates of the player that has won the game. So we're going to do a new type. So we'll do winning cells. And we will start that off with undefined when the game first starts. So we'll only set this if someone wins the game. So we'll do a type, we will do winning cells, and we'll set this to undefined for when the game starts, or it will be a number, a 2D number array. All right, so then what we'll do is in our constructor, what we'd want to do is when we create a new instance of our Tic-Tac-Toe class, we'd actually want to initialize our game board. So we'll want to update our board property to be our 2D array, to have the three rows, the three columns. We want to make sure all of those values are set to our empty space. And we want to update the current player's turn, the game winner, and the winning cells. So what we need to do is let's actually fix that so it's game winner. And then what we'll do is we're going to call a new private method that we've not created yet. So we'll just do this, and then we'll do initialize board. Then what we'll do is below our constructor, we will go ahead and create this method. So this method will not return anything. And then what we'll do is we'll go ahead and first we'll do this.currentPlayer, and we'll set this to player X. Then what we'll do is we'll do this.gameWinner, and we'll set that to undefined. We'll do this.winningcells, and we'll also set that to undefined. And so what we're doing here is, even though these values have default values when we create our class, we're going to use initialize board to also reset our game state. So if you imagine when a player finishes the game, they might want to play another game of Tic Tac Toe. So instead of having to recreate our Tic Tac Toe class, we could have a method to reset the game state and allow the player to start over. So by putting this logic into our initialize board method, we'll make it reusable so that we can call it through these other methods. All right, so now we just need to go ahead and update our initial board. So what we'll do is we'll do this.board. We'll set it equal to an empty array. So we're going to go ahead and empty it out. Then we're going to create a for loop. So we'll do for let I equal 0. If I is less than 3, then we'll go ahead and increment I by 1. Then we'll push an empty array into our board. Because remember, this is going to be a 2D array. So we'll do this.board push, and we'll push in our empty array. Then we're going to have an inner loop. So we'll do let j equal 0, and we'll have j is less than 3. We'll increment j by 1. Then we're going to go ahead and push into that new array we just created. So we'll do this.board, and we'll grab the index of I. So when we first loop, we'll have 0. So our first index will be here. When we loop again, it'll be 1. So our second array we would access, and so on and so forth. So we're going to use I for our index. Then we're just going to go ahead and push our string. So we want an empty string because no one's claimed that spot yet, into our board. So then the last thing we need to do is we need one more property, actually. We need to track if the game is actually over. So what we'll do is we'll just do another private property. We're going to do is game over, and we're going to set that equal to false. So it's going to be a Boolean. Then we need to also set that down here. So this is game over, and we'll set that back to false. So then what we'll do after our constructor is we're just going to do a console log, and we're going to do this.board and just make sure that's working properly. So now what we'll do is we'll come back to our main.ts file inside our create method here. We're just going to go ahead and create an instance of our Tic Tac Toe game class. So we'll do const Tic Tac Toe will be equal to a new Tic Tac Toe instance, and go ahead and save. So then what we'll do is back in our browser, if we go and open up our developer console, just go ahead and take a look. And so we'll have an array of arrays. And so we have our 3 rows, our 3 columns with our empty strings. All right, and with that, we have our basic structure for our Tic Tac Toe class. All right, so next what we need to do is we need to add in the logic for allowing a player to make a move. So in our Tic Tac Toe class, what we're going to do is we're going to add a new public method. So we're going to do public make move, and this method is going to take in the X and Y position of where the player clicked on our game board, and then we'll update our game board state based on that position and whose turn it is. So we're going to take in the X value, so our X coordinate, we'll take in our Y coordinate, our Y value of our coordinate, and this method is not going to return anything. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to make sure that that space is not already taken. So we'll do this dot board, and we'll do X and Y. And if it doesn't equal an empty space, then we know someone's already claimed it. So we'll go ahead and return early. So what we'd want to do is actually add additional validation logic here to make sure the coordinate is within the bounds of our game board. We would want to make sure the game's not already over. And if this happened, we'd want to do some type of error handling, so then that way we don't update our game state. But with this being a prototype, we're not going to dive that deep into the code. So then what we'll want to do is, now that we've validated the space is empty, we'll want to go ahead and update the value of that space in our board to show that the player has claimed that space. So what we'll do is we'll just do an if statement. We'll do if this current player's turn is equal to player O, then we'll do one thing. So we'll do this dot board, our X and Y value. We will set it equal to player dot O. Otherwise, that means it's player X's turn. So we'll do the same logic, but we'll do player.x. So now that we've updated the state of the board, we need to update the current player's turn. So what we'll do is we're just going to copy this line here. So if the current player's turn is equal to player O, then we're going to go ahead and set this.current player's turn equal to player.x. Otherwise, we just need to do reverse of that. So we'll copy that and we will do O. All right, so now that we've updated the game state, what we need to do is check if someone has won the game after they've made the move. So what we'll do is we're just going to call a new method, and this will have the logic for doing that check. So we'll do this, a private method. We'll do check for game end. Then what we'll do is we're just going to go ahead and create that private method right here. And so this won't return anything. And so in here, what we're going to want to do is check to see if either all of our positions on the board are filled, and if they are and there's no winner, then the game would end in a draw. If all of the values in a single row or column are the same, then we know we have a winner. And then likewise, we'd have our diagonals. So if there's a win there, then we would have a winner. So to do those checks, what we're going to need to do is just basically check each of the values of a single row are the same. And so to do that, we'll do if this.board. So our first index, the first position, does not equal an empty space. So we only need to do this check if that space is filled. And we'll do this.board. I will take the same position equals that first element, and if it equals that second element, then we know that there's a winner. So for this condition, what we'll do is we'll do this.gameWinner will be equal to the value that's placed in our board. So we'll do this.board, we'll just paste that, and now we have a winner. So then this will check just the top row. We need to check the middle and then the bottom row. So what we'll do is we'll do an else if, and inside here, we're going to have the same logic. We will just have a different index. So we will have our index 1 to represent that second row here. And then we need to update that here. Then what we'll do is we just need to update our game winner based on that value. All right, finally for our bottom row, we'll do the same thing. We'll just copy this block of code. We'll paste it here. Go ahead and update our game winner. So it'll be our second index. And we'll just update that in each of those locations. All right, and so now we have the logic for seeing if there is a winner based on our rows. And now we just need to do that for our columns. So to start that off, we're just going to copy this block of code here. And then what we need to do is we'll check our first item in our column, so position 0, 0. And then we just want to see if that's equal to our first column in the second row. And then likewise, our So then we just need to see if that value equals our second item in our column and then our third item in our column. So index 2 here. And if it's equal, then we will take that first index here. So what we'll do is we'll do an else if, and we're going to copy that block of code. Copy this. And then what we're going to do is we're going to check our second column. So we will have 0, 1, and we'll have 0, 1, 0, 1. And then what we'll do is we'll add our 1 here, and that would be 0, 1. All right, and then for our last column, we'll copy this whole block, and we're going to do 0, 2. All right, so now we have our logic for checking for our columns. So now all we need to do is check for our diagonals. So for our diagonals, this will be 0, 0. We'll want to do 1, 1, and then 2, 2. And then likewise, we'll have 0, 2, 1, 1, and then 0, 2. So those will be the coordinates we need to check. All right, and so one quick change before we do that, we actually want this to be an else if. So then that way we continue checking after that if there. So what we'll want to do is add another else if. So if, and we'll copy this block of code here since we're still checking 3 cells. So we'll do 0, 0. So if 0, 0 equals 1, 1, and it equals 2, 2, then we know we have a winner from one of our diagonals. So we will copy this code here, and we'll do 0, 0. Then finally, else if, we'll copy this block. And now we just need to do the reverse diagonal. So we will have 0, 2. And if 0, 2 equals 1, 1. And if 0, 2 equals 2, 0. Then we have another winner. So we'll go ahead and copy this. Paste that here. And we'll just do 0, 2. All right, so just to quickly recap what we did here is basically in our check for game end method, what we want to do is check to see if there's a winner by seeing if all the values in a single row or column are the same. So to do that check, we grab the first cell in one of our rows, so 0, 0 here. We want to make sure that 0, 0 equals 0, 1 and 0, 2. So that's what we did in our logic here. And if it does, then we don't need to do our other checks. Hence, we did the else if, and we update our game winner to represent that value. If there's no winner found in that first row, then we proceed to check our second row here. So this would be 1, 0, and then 1, 1, 1, 2 to check that row. And then we iterate and do that again for our third row until we finally get to our checks for our column. And so for our column, we'll have 0, 0, we'll have 0, 1, and then we'll have 0, 0, we'll have 1, 0, and 2, 0. And so those are the checks that we're doing here for our single column. And then we kind of rinse and repeat until we check all of our rows and columns. Finally, we just need to check our diagonals, and so we just need to check those coordinates to see if there is a winner. So once we've done all of these checks, what we need to do is check to see if game winner is not undefined, then we know our game is over. So what we'll do is we'll do this dot game winner does not equal undefined because we only set this based on the if statements above. So we'll do that is game over, and we'll set it equal to true, and we will return early. Otherwise, the last thing we need to do is see if every single value on our board is filled. So if every row and every column does not equal an empty space, that means the game ends in a draw and there's no further moves that can be made. So to do this, we're just going to do a new variable. We'll do const is board filled. And we're going to set this equal to our board, and we'll use the every method on our array to check to see if some condition is true for every value in our array. So this would be our row. We're going to make sure all of our rows are filled. So what we'll do is we'll do our row, And for each of our rows, we're also going to call the every method to make sure each cell in our row does not equal an empty space. So we'll do cell, and we're just going to return cell does not equal an empty space. Then what we'll do is if is board is filled, then we know the game is over. We'll do this is game over. We'll set equal to true, and we're going to go ahead and update our game winner. So this game winner will be equal to draw. All right, so just to recap what we did here is we use the every method on our board array to grab each element of our array and iterate through it. And every will only return true if every check for each of those elements returns true as well. And so basically on this every here, we're saying every element in this inner array, so in our top row, cell 1, 2, and 3, does not equal an empty space. If that's true, then we return true for that row, and we do that check for each of our rows in our board. All right, and so with us now having the logic for checking for a game winner, we have all of the game logic that we need for our class. All right, and so what we're going to do is we're going to do some code cleanup real quick. So what we're going to do is we're going to get rid of winning cells. So the reason we're getting rid of this is we don't really need it for our prototype. The idea here was we would add this property to track what the winning cell coordinates are after players won the game. And then that way we could do something with our Tic Tac Toe implementations and do something like highlight which game pieces actually won the game. So if you imagine, like, we would have our X's and O's, and maybe we want to apply like some type of shader or highlight what pieces won, and then that was very clear to the players that were playing what resulted in the winning sequence. For our prototype, this isn't needed, but this would be a great enhancement to the game. All right, and so with that, we've finished our handle players making move logic. All right, and so before we integrate our class with our phaser 3 game, we just need to add a couple getters, so that way we can get the values for the properties that we need for our game. So real quick, in our constructor, we're going to get rid of our console log, and then right below our constructor, we're going to add those getters. So our getters are just a way for us to return a value for one of our private properties without returning a reference to that property. And then that way, outside sources cannot manipulate the internal logic of our class. And so what we'll do is we'll do get, we're going to do current player turn. And so this will return our player. So we'll do return this dot current player's turn. We'll want to know if the game is over. So we'll do get is game over. And this is going to return a Boolean. So we return this dot is game over. And then we just need to know who the game winner is. Then that way we can update our text in our game object. So we'll do get game winner, and this will return our game winner type. And so we'll do return this dot game winner. All right, and so now we have the getters we need. So now we just need to connect our Tic Tac Toe class to our phaser 3 game. All right, so to go ahead and connect our Tic Tac Toe class to our phaser scene, the first thing we're going to do is in our main.ts file, we're going to add a new private property to our game class. So we're just going to call this Tic Tac Toe, and we're going to set it to our Tic Tac Toe class for our type. Then what we'll do is instead of doing const tic tac toe, we're going to do this dot tic tac toe equals a new instance of our Tic Tac Toe game. Then next, we're going to want to create a property to reference our text game object for the current player's turn, since we're going to be updating this. So what we'll do is we'll do player turn text game object, and what we'll do is we'll set this to a phaser game objects text game object for our type. So then what we'll do is instead of doing this dot add, we'll do this dot our new private property will equal that text game object. All right, so now the rest of our logic actually needs to come down into our add game piece method here. And basically in our callback event for when a player clicks on one of our game objects, this is where we're going to interact with our Tic Tac Toe class. So the first thing we're going to do, we'll do if this Tic Tac Toe is game over, we're going to go ahead and return. So basically what we're doing is we're adding an early return, so that way if someone has won, we don't try to access our tic-tac-toe class and do any additional logic here. So if you imagine if someone won by getting 3 in a column here, then if there was an open space, we don't want the players to interact with that and then mess with the game logic. So we'll just return early because we don't need to do anything. Then what we'll want to do is we're going to get a reference to the current player's turn. So we'll do const current player. We'll set that equal to our tic-tac-toe class and our current player turn variable. So then what we're going to want to do is we're going to call the make move method on our tic-tac-toe class, and we'll pass in our x and y coordinates from the game piece that was clicked. So after we've made our move, then we need to go ahead and update our game object to have the correct frame. So what we'll do is we'll do if our current player is equal to x, then we'll update the set frame. We'll update our frame by calling the set frame method, and we'll specify the frame index that we want to set our game object to. And so then we'll just add an else, and what we'll do is we'll copy and paste that, and we'll just use frame 1. All right, so with those changes, if we expand our game in our browser, what we should be able to do is click on one of our game objects and see that the frame gets updated on our game object. All right, so we can see that that logic is working. So the next thing we want to do is go ahead and check to see if a player has won. So what we'll do is we'll do if this tic-tac-toe is game over. So if the game is over, and if the first thing we'll do is we'll check if they're if it's not a draw. So we'll do is tic-tac-toe game winner does not equal draw. That means either player X or player O has won. Then what we'll do is we'll update our game text. So we'll do this player's turn text game object, and we're going to call this set text method. And what this does is this method allows us to specify a string or array of strings, and this will update that text game object to have that text value to be displayed. So what we'll do is we're going to reference the current player. So whichever player's turn it was, whoever just made the move, that's whose turn we want to reference, not the most recently changed player. So that's why we stored that value in this variable up here, because after we call make move, the current player's value would be updated. So then, so now we know which player it is, and we're just going to say 1. We'll put in some exclamations, and then that way we have that text. Then what we'll do is we're just going to return early. Otherwise, what we're going to do is we're going to check if the game is over. So we'll do our tic-tac-toe reference, and we'll do is game over. And so this would mean the game has ended in a draw. So what we'll do is we're just going to copy this line of code here, and we're going to set, instead of current player turn, we're just going to do our tic-tac-toe, and we'll use our game winner text. And we just need to switch that to a string, because we know when game is over, game winner is set. So that's where it's going to make that a string. And so basically that's going to just say draw, since that's what we're setting it to. Finally, if the game is not actually over, then we actually need to update our text to say whose turn it is. So we're going to copy this line of code here, and we will say, instead of the current player, we want to reference the actual updated current player. So we'll reference our Tic Tac Toe variable, our instance, and we'll do current player's turn. So this will say player O if player X just made their move. And we will just change this to a turn. All right, and so now our class should be hooked up into our game instance. So what we should be able to do is play a game of tic-tac-toe. So if we go ahead and test this, we can see X1 in that instance. If we refresh, and O1, perfect. And then what we'll do is we're just going to test a few combinations. Excellent. And just try to make sure, need to make sure we don't have a winner. Perfect, and the game ends in a draw. And then finally what we'll do is, so after someone has won, we don't allow a player to update the game state. All right, and so now we've completed our final step. All right, and with that wraps up our tic-tac-toe basic prototype implementation using Phaser 3. So just kind of a recap, what we did is we took our basic Phaser 3 template, we went ahead and started adding basic game objects to allow us to have the base functionality for our game. We created a very basic tic-tac-toe class that will have all of the logic that we need for playing tic-tac-toe, and this allows us to abstract that away from our game so we could reuse it in other projects. Then finally we tied both these things together to create our working prototype. So it's just a very basic tic-tac-toe implementation. And so we could easily take this prototype and enhance it to make it a full game that we could pass out to someone. So like some easy ideas for enhancements is we could have like a title screen, some animations, game over screen, allow the ability to, after the game ends, you could click on it to restart the game. We could add in simple scoring metrics for like tracking how many wins, losses, etc. We could even go further. You could add a basic CPU that could pick random spots, or you could implement an algorithm to have a very smart CPU to try to always beat the player, and other things like multiplayer. So actually multiplayer, so you have two players playing on different computers. And then there's just so much more we could do with this. And so now you can go ahead and take your prototype and extend it further. So I just want to say thank you so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed the content. If you're interested in more great Phaser 3 content, please check out some of the links on your screen now. If you did like this video, please go ahead and leave a like or leave a comment down below. If you have any suggestions for future content, also leave a comment. And just as a reminder, you can find the completed source code. There'll be a link down in the description to the code on GitHub.